Hey, I'm Michael Dorinda,
And I'm Jake Bennett.
and welcome to episode 175 of the North Meet South Web Podcast.
Got it. Nice job. Michael, tell us about all your new tech. What do you got
New
there,
tech.
dude? You have far outspent any money that you've ever made doing podcasting. I think, no, that's probably not true, but you do love new tech. You sent a
New
picture of your
gadget.
desk the other day, and I was like, that guy has got every toy and gadget that has come out in the last 5 years for podcasting. He's got all of them.
This,
But you know
this,
what?
so
I will
this,
say, that
this is
beautiful
what I
video that you
do.
made the other day was
It
was
was good.
great. I mean, you
It came
used
out
it
well.
all. You
Yeah,
used all the stuff. It did.
finally. Yeah, well, this is the thing. I will always buy some stuff and then I'll go, okay,
Mm-hmm.
now that I've got the stuff, I'll make the videos. And by the time I've bought the
Mm-hmm.
stuff and set it all up, I get busy and then I do not make the videos. So this time I actually
Yes,
made the video and it was good because
you
we
did.
talked about it
It was.
on Laravel News last week. And I kind of just threw it out there of like, here's the thing that people, but I thought, no, you know what, I might just give this a crack. And then uh, because I haven't done it for a while, I was a little bit rusty. So the first time I recorded like my full 49-inch screen instead of the virtual
Yeah. Yeah.
display, and then I redid it and I got the virtual display, but then I had my microphone muted, so there was
Oh
no
no.
audio. And then I recorded it again, and then I think I got three-quarters of the way through what I thought was going to be a good take, and then Liv walked in and she was like, "Daddy," and I'm like, "Come on, mate, you know that when the door to the office is shut, you're not supposed to come in." And she just looks at me and she's like, "Yeah, but Dad, I want you to change the game on the Xbox for me." Okay.
And you're
I
like,
thought,
good.
playing on the
Yep.
Xbox meant that they would be distracted and they would not come in the middle
Mm-hmm.
of a thing. So anyway, I think I ended up doing like 8 or 9 takes before I got it. But then
Okay. Okay.
by the time that ninth take came around, I was able to one shot from start to finish, which was
Yeah,
good
you were
because it
locked in,
makes
man. It
makes
looked like it
editing
was a
very
one take
easy.
wonder. From my side, it looked like it was great.
Yeah.
Um, but so okay, I'm curious about that real quick. So while we're talking about setup of this stuff, we were talking about this. So, um, is it Better Touch Tool? Is that what it was called? The one that
Better display.
Better Display. Okay, Better Display.
Yeah.
Better Touch Tool is like the window management. Better Display is a different one. Um, Oops, you still there? What just happened with my
Yeah.
machine? It
I
literally
can I can
shut
see you,
off.
but you're all blurry.
What in the world? Sorry about that. Anyway, yeah. So Better Display
Hmm.
will allow you to create like a little virtual display, right? So
Yeah.
let me talk about why this is helpful real quick, and then I want to ask you a question about your video setup there. Um, I will say Better Display works great. However, um, I think that the other tool that you suggested was actually better, which is called like Desk Pad. I think is what it's
Oh yeah,
called. Desk
TJ.
Pad.
Yeah, TJ mentioned that one.
Yeah, Desk Pad is a little bit easier. I feel like to install less
Hmm.
options,
Yeah.
and you don't have to have a pro license. It's just like sort of free, and so Desk Pad is interesting. So what it does is and how I've used it today specifically is there will be times where I'm trying to record something or I'm on a call. And one of the things I've come to really love in Tuple is this ability to only share half my screen. And so I've got
Hmm.
an ultra wide monitor and I can share half my screen. And the nice thing about that is anything that's on the left side of my screen is viewable to the people who I'm sharing with, which is excellent. But when I'm going to do screen sharing on Teams or if I'm
Yeah.
trying to record a video in
On
Slack, you
Slack.
can only
Yeah.
select the entire display or
Hmm.
a window. And it's like,
Hmm.
I need both, but I don't want to show the entire display. I only want to show a
Yeah.
portion of it. So it's like annoying. So this desk pad will allow me to create a virtual display off to the side. And it actually sits, it's not actually off to the side, it's actually sitting on top of my stuff. But I can make
Hmm.
it whatever resolution I want, and I can just drag into there whatever things I'm interested in sharing, and away you go. And so it's really useful and was very helpful today when I was recording some videos to throw into issues. Um, and I was curious if that's what you used, something like that for your video.
Yeah. So I've got a 49-inch ultra wide display, and the main
It's
reason that I am
huge.
using better display is not for the virtual stuff, but it allows you to project to stream effectively a high DPI display um to a screen that is not otherwise high DPI. So whilst I've got 49 inches, it's like 5K by 1.5. It's 5160 by 1440 or something like that. So it's not as crisp as an Apple display. And so
Mm-hmm.
using better display allows you to project or to stream a 10, whatever it is, 11, 20 11,020 by 2880 so that you get that pixel density so it actually looks crisp. But
Yeah.
the side benefit of that is that it allows you to do these virtual to screen. So it's like running virtual desktop, but it's a
Hmm.
virtual display that kind of just opens up in a picture-in-picture window on your desktop. And then I can say, QuickTime record that screen,
That
and that way I
display.
can put
Yeah.
everything in there. And so it's running in high DPI and the correct resolution. It's not so small that I can't see it to record it. I don't have to muck around with like getting my laptop screen out or getting my MacBook out and recording on that screen to get the things. And so it just makes the whole process easier. And as you said, like with DeskPad, it also gives you the ability to say, okay, I need to stream this screen if I'm using anything that's not Drupal, basically. So if I need to do, like this
Yeah.
morning I had a huddle on Slack and I needed to share my screen, so I was able to do that, and project a 16 by 9, because if someone is viewing your screen and you're on a
Yeah.
49-inch ultra wide and they're on like a 15-inch or a 14-inch MacBook, then you end up with this
It's near
very
impossible
long
for them to
thin
see it. Yeah.
display. Yeah, so it's very good for that as well.
So do you have one that you prefer over the other, or you
I've
use
never
them for
used
different things?
DeskPad. Yeah, I've never used DeskPad.
Okay.
So
Okay.
and like I have the Pro license for better display, but that's because I
Hmm.
wanted the high DPI stuff and all of that other
You
functionality
can
that
do
I
that on
get.
DeskPad too, which is nice. So you can
Yeah,
just go
nice.
into the settings and push it to the high DPI settings, which is pretty cool.
Mm.
So I've just started playing with it today. So it may be that I end up switching over to better display at some point. Who knows? But
Mhm.
it was super useful for me today. So in your video that you made, you then had like your video on the right hand side, and then you had the display, and then you had a nice background. Did you do that in post? Did you put the display and your image and all that stuff together in post? That wasn't like live.
So that was the nice background. That's my desktop
Uh huh.
wallpaper. So
Hmm.
that was there. I then used Raycast to shape the windows to size them to like 2/3 or whatever it was, 80% of the thing, and then I just left like a gap on the side. And so I recorded the
What
camera.
was just yeah, you recorded the camera over on the right hand side? Like you
So I recorded the full frame camera, and
Yeah,
then I just like resized it because that then gave me the ability to do like the talking head at the start of the video,
got it.
and then to like transition to and then I just mask the video so that it fits into that slot on the
Yeah, it
right
looked
hand
really
side of the
good.
video. So
It looked really, really good.
yeah, been
Nicely
meaning to
done.
do it for a while, but finally got around to it. I don't really have ideas for videos, but I'm hoping more of them come to me like that one did. Just in like I've got an idea for something that I want to do, but I'm not quite committed to do it just yet. So I'm hoping there's a way I can ease into it over time. But I thought it was good fun, like just those 3 to 5 minute videos, and then sharing them. Sharing them is difficult because like the majority of my audience, I think, is international. So unfortunately, I have to resort to scheduling them, the video to come out like around the time when most of my audience is going to watch it, as opposed to when I'm awake. And then I've staggered it, so I like scheduled it on X, and then I did like a follow up tweet on that manually. But then I posted it to Blue Sky when I woke up, and then I posted it to
Yeah.
LinkedIn a little bit later, just like to kind of spread that video across a few different places. And then it's on YouTube as well. So for anyone that's subscribed and actually watches stuff on there, it might pop up there and get some views that way. So yeah,
Yeah, I
I've
love
got
go
no
ahead.
real expectations around people watching it or anything, but I feel like I should get into doing some content now that I've got like all of this stuff and
For sure.
justify it being in my room.
Yeah, well, I feel like, I was gonna say it feels so much easier to quickly throw out a video instead of a blog post. But if you're doing 9 takes and doing all the beautiful stuff that you
Yeah.
did, probably not, or maybe not. I'm sure over time it'll get faster though. And I mean, the promise of the future would be that it would, AI would be able to watch your video and extract a blog post for you, including all
Mm.
your code snippets and all that stuff too, which would be pretty cool.
Yeah, Chris
So
Sev's got
yeah.
that project
Hmm.
called Tap 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 Tip Tip something.
Yeah.
I will see if I can find it and put it like. But yeah, you just point it basically at a YouTube video and it'll do the titles, the summaries, the chapters, the tags, all of that kind of stuff. Like we've used it for the Laracon AU videos in the past because when there's 17 of them and they're 40 minutes and or 30 minutes, I haven't watched all of them in detail, so it's easier to kind of get AI to do that and break it all down in that regard. So I have to massage the wording though because it does sound very robotic. So yeah.
Yeah,
And
it was good
and
though.
it's
It
always
was very
like,
good.
in this video the speaker does, and it's like, okay, but it's still my video, so the tone of voice, or the person speaking in the description has to be like, I talk about this, not the speaker in the video. So,
Mhm.
but it can't make that. I guess you could tell it. I am the person in the video, and I'm talking about this stuff. But I just
Use
played
11
around with a
Labs
few
to
different
throw your
things.
voice in there. Yeah,
Mm, yeah, just
something
make it all
crazy
up.
like that.
That's right.
Yep. Um, you were talking earlier in one of our channels about some stuff at work, and so I
Hmm.
figured while you had that on the brain, it would probably be a good
Therapy
time to just
session.
chat about it. So,
Yeah.
first things first, I'm wondering if you can kind of re-describe it. I was reading through it and I was like, I got partway through and I'm like, let's just talk about this on the show. So,
Yeah.
you're going to do your very best to explain the scenario that you're in and the different solutions you're contemplating. I am ready. Go.
So we have in our application, we talked about this quote tool in the past. And so within the context of the
Quote tool.
quote
Quote
tool,
tool. Okay. Yeah.
there is multiple lending institutions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's like lender A, lender B, lender C, whatever. So there is a lender A class, and then there is also a lender A subnamespace that will have some additional support classes in there. So there's one that does knockouts, one that's got variables, one that does calculations. So 3 different classes that are in there. And the way that this was built some years ago now, so we're in the process of refactoring, modernizing, and making it a little bit more sane, is we've got all of these constants defined on the lender class, like the top level class. And then for some of these classes, we need to pass that information through into the calculations and into the knockout classes, because they're then using these values. So what we do for whatever reason is we assign all of the constants on the parent class to an array, and then we pass that array of constants into the child classes, and then they're
Okay.
referenced in there. Now, we're trying to obviously structure this in a way that we can have a bit more durability and testability, and like support in IDEs for what's available and things like. Because as soon as you take that constant and you assign it to an array key, you've lost
Yeah. You've
all
lost the whole benefit
typing.
of the constant. Yeah.
Right. So I thought, okay, we'll put this into some kind of like read-only class that just has these constants in there, because we can't use
So just
enums.
extract them from the parent lender class
Yeah,
and pull them out into a
yeah,
constant, and just a
yeah, and
specified class for these
yeah.
constant values. Okay, sure.
And so this then becomes a conventional thing to do. You can't really have an interface for it, or any abstract base class, because each of these lenders may have a different set of definitions. So we just call this class definitions. And I thought, if you make
Yeah.
it final and read only, and then you just have all these constants in there, and then you can just say like definitions : monthly fee,
Yeah.
for example.
Right.
And so
Great
you've got
idea.
the type
Yeah.
support; those things are available. The problem with making it the problem with making it a class is that like you can't extend from it, because we wouldn't want behavior on this class of the definitions, because the definitions should just be constants. It shouldn't have any behavior attached to it.
Sure.
So you cannot have like the lender class extends definitions, because it doesn't really make sense in an object-oriented sense, and you can't use it with the other places. So where I landed with it was to actually make that definitions file an interface, because the interface allows you to use it in multiple places. It allows you to use multiple interfaces, of course, because PHP allows multiple implementations,
Yeah.
but not multiple inheritance. And it also means that you don't find yourself in a situation where you slip into adding behaviors into the definitions. Because you can't put methods on an interface. You can say, these methods have to be implemented, but you can't
And just
take
methods. Yeah. So
you can't just have behavior attached to that class as to that interface. So, and the interface means that if we need those constants to be available on the lender class, but also on the calculations class and on the knockouts class, we can just implement that interface, and all of that stuff is available in one place. It's typed. It's there to work as is required. So that's where we landed on that. But then the question that I had posed.
can I
Yeah, go
pause
on.
before you move
Sure,
on? Yeah.
sure.
So this interface is the interface. What's the name of the interface that you've created? And
It's
all
called
these lenders.
definitions. Yeah,
just
so
does
each
definitions
lender,
interface,
yeah, each
extends
lender in
definitions, or
its
implements
lender's
definitions
sub
interface.
namespace would have an interface called definitions, and that's where we would put all these things. So this is now conventional. I don't believe there's any way to enforce this beyond saying like when you create a new lender, it should have the base lender class which implements or extends the parent lender, and then it would have this sub namespace named for that lender, which would have definitions, it would have knockouts, variables, and calculations in there. So it's all conventional at that point.
So the definitions are actually stored where?
So in this constant, it would be like app quotes lender, or app quotes institutions lender definitions.php,
Mm-hmm.
which is harder so say we're at the top
So
level and
because
we've just got
if
like
I'm
all of
thinking
these
about,
lenders.
yeah, if I'm
Yeah,
thinking
so
about how I would actually access, like, and maybe I missed it, so I'm going to walk through it. Previously, you had the constants defined on the top level. Great. Then you said I'm going to extract it to a class that has the constants. Great, but I don't want to be able to attach behavior, so I'm going to make it final read only. But then you can't extend from it to pull it into these classes, so you either have to like construct it or pull it from the container or whatever. So instead, you're just implementing an interface. But an interface just says you have to have these methods defined, right? It can't have
mhm.
properties, can it?
It can have constants in the interface. So we've got
Can it?
constants in the interface. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
did
yeah.
not realize that. Oh,
And
okay. Well, that's
as of
amazing.
PHP
I actually did not
8.4,
know that.
yeah, as of PHP 8.4, you can also define properties on an interface using. But I don't
But
want
on
to go into
8.4,
that
you
too
can use
much.
enums, so
Yeah,
you
yeah,
won't have that problem, right? So,
yeah. Yeah, the properties is an interesting one because you have to use property hooks and like you've got to define whether they can get or set. And I'm still trying to work through what that actually looks like at the moment. It's doing my head in
I
a little
did
bit.
not. That's where I was lost. I did not realize you could set constants on
Oh
an
yeah, an
interface. That's
interface
interesting.
can have constants, and like that's been true for a very long time. But you haven't been able to
It's pretty
define
cool. So you
properties
just
on an
self
interface.
colon name of the constant, and that's it.
Yep.
You're all set.
And it's
Interesting.
available wherever. So you can implement obviously multiple interfaces on a class. And
Yeah,
so
that's
if
really
you needed to
freaking
have
cool.
all these different things, then you've got that. But the reason we don't use enums is because fees could be float.
Could you just use
You
a
can't.
trait? Why would you use a? Could you use a trait instead of an interface, or no?
You could use a trait to decorate that, but again with the trait, there is the possibility that you could start attaching behavior to it, which is the main thing I want to avoid. I want this to just be a collection of these definitions of fees, of like variable percentages, of maximum loan terms, things like that.
Mhm.
That's all it is. There is no behavior attached to this whatsoever, and that's
And
why we settled on the interface.
And the idea behind using the interface and the constants is just like instead of like a config is because accessing them using a double colon is easier than
Mm.
using a config, and you get the type safety and all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So we
Yeah,
want to
yeah, that makes
rely on,
sense.
we don't want to rely on pulling stuff out of config. We want to have like type support. What do you call it? Auto completion support. We want to have static analysis support, all of that kind of stuff to make sure that you're not accessing things that don't exist by accident and whatever. Um, and yeah, the interface kind of gives you that explicit, okay, this thing is implementing definition, so we know that these things are available in there. But
Very
yeah,
cool.
we
Learn
we we
something new.
looked at
That's awesome.
we looked at using, but we wrote enums off straight away because fees could be decimal values. You cannot have a float.
Mm,
You could return it as a string, but then you juggling strings into floats and doing all kinds of weird things there. Whereas with constants, you can just say public const float monthly
yeah,
fee equals
yeah.
whatever, and then you've got that available straight away without having to faff around with it. So
And
um,
enums, honestly, like I don't even know if an enum is the correct thing for
no,
that anyway,
not really.
because you have like a enum that has a set of cases, and so like all of those enums really ideally should be related to like they are a type of
Should all
thing,
be, yeah,
right?
correct.
Yeah, exactly. And so I don't know an enum necessarily even they are constants. They are
Yep,
constants, and
yep,
so yeah. Seems
yep,
like a good solution. All right. So
yeah,
that's all precursor to the actual
yeah.
problem that you wanted to talk about, which is go ahead.
Yeah, so the actual problem we have now is that this lender class was previously taking all of these constants and passing them as an array
Hmm.
into, let's
Sure.
say, calculations. So we've got rid
Okay.
of that.
And
Calculations
calculations is another class.
is another class. Yep. So this is doing things specific to that lender in
Is it
order
lender
to
A
calculate.
calculations?
lender A / calculation. So it's in the lender A
Okay.
namespace,
Yep.
sub
Got it.
namespace, and it's just calculations.php. And
Yep.
so because we need access to these constants, well, this calculations class now can just implement the definitions
Yep.
interface, and
Nice.
all of
Very
those
cool.
things are available. So we replace all of the calls to like this arrow constants,
Oh, so nice.
whatever,
Yeah, that's
with
great.
just static : constant name.
Feels so much
So
better.
that's easy. But so we, in this lender class, it defers to the calculations to do calculations. Calculate the max allowable loan term, for example, calculate whether or not this loan is applicable to this set of inputs. So, the lender may not support unsecured lending. It might not support lending money. They might only do asset, for example. And so we instantiate the calculations object inside the constructor of the lender, and we pass the input from the lender into the calculations. And so where I'm at now is that because we have discrete tests for the calculations object, anytime we want to test that, we also need to scaffold out the input and pass it in, right?
Into the lender, right?
Into the calculations class.
Okay.
So we're now we're now
okay.
down a level. And then
just to make sure I'm clear, you pass things originally to the lender, and then the lender passes things into the
Yeah.
Okay, so you're just testing the calculations in isolation,
testing in isolation,
throw it into the calculations. Got it.
So the problem that we're having now is that the lines are a little bit blurred in terms of like the constants were being used to pass these constants, but it was also being used to pass calculated values from the lender into the calculation. So as part of our inputs into the quote tool, we would ask what is the age of what is the year of manufacture of the vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
So the input says the vehicle year is 2025.
Mm-hmm.
But we would then calculate the age of that vehicle and pass that as a constant into the calculation.
So now you have computed constants, or you were using computed constants essentially. Okay, got it.
So now that we're no longer passing constants into this calculation object, how do we get the vehicle age into it? And so part of this journey is to look at all of these things that we're doing in all of these different classes, calculating a vehicle age, determining the type, whether or not the user requesting the quote is an asset broker or a mortgage broker. All of this kind of stuff that is existing in multiple places, we're now hoisting up into the input object. So you can just say this arrow input arrow is asset broker. This input is, or this input vehicle age equals whatever. So we're moving this behavior, but then testing it becomes difficult because we don't have as much control over those values. So before, because we were passing the vehicle age as a constant, when we instantiated the calculation class, we could pass arbitrary vehicle age into that class. So if we wanted to test 8 years, we would pass 8. If you wanted to test a vehicle that is 8.5, we would pass 8.5 into that constants array. And then the method that uses the vehicle age is just looking at this constant's vehicle age.
Yep.
We can't do that anymore because we're not passing those values in. So now we modify that method to get the vehicle age from the input. And we're still passing the input in. So we can say like the vehicle, we've got this method that like basically checks to see, is this vehicle less than or equal to 8 years, less than or equal to 9 years, less than or equal to 10 years? How old is this thing? And that impacts how long a loan term you can have, because there's a maximum age that the vehicle can be at the end of the term. So if you buy a 5-year-old car and the maximum term that it can be is 8, well, then the maximum loan term that you can have is 3 years, because the age of the car at the end of the longest term that you can get a loan for is 8, right?
Yeah.
So we can't now pass 8.5 in because our input is only accepting the year of manufacture. and it's
So that's how you're doing it. So you're passing the inputs, like, are you passing the unmodified input values straight through the lender and straight into the calculations? And so
correct.
you've basically moved the behavior for determining the age of the vehicle down to the calculations class is what you're doing.
Determining the age of the vehicle is still at the input level. Like we've hoisted
Hmm.
that up because we don't want to have to
Okay.
calculate that in all the different places. That is a fixed behavior. But the problem
Yeah,
is
sure.
we can't test 8.5 now in this method in the calculation class because all we have to determine the age of the vehicle is a year of manufacture relative to this year, which is an
Hmm.
integer, right? We can't. There's no because we pass a year. We would have to then you still have to start mucking with the dates, to get the outcome you want. So, okay, given that today is the 4th or the 5th of May, or whichever you want it to be, or the 6th of May, depending on who you are and where you're listening, um, for me to get 8.5, it means I have to travel to, in my test, 8.5 years ago, and I've got to go and figure out all these calculations now. So I'm wondering, and this is the question, having explained this for 10 minutes now, do I, instead of referencing this input vehicle age from the input class, do I just pass that value into the method? And does that then change the construct of this calculations class where it's not really accepting any input in the grand sense? Everything is passed from the lender into this calculation class. So this method now that is calculating the max allowable loan term is not looking at this input vehicle age. It's being passed dollar vehicle age as a method, as a property, or as an argument to the function, and operating on that, so that in my tests I can
You can
pass
just test that.
8.5, 9,
Yeah, just test
9.2,
that by
whatever.
that method in isolation. Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so re-architecting this stuff is interesting because obviously we need it to keep working in the same way. Well, we need the outcomes to be the same, but we need to change the behavior of this. And does that, at what point do we do this? Do we continue passing the input in and just like go near enough is good enough without the ability to really specifically test every boundary case of this conditional method? Or do we pass in values directly to those methods and call them that way?
Yeah, that's tough because I'm sure the outputs vary pretty wildly depending on the number of inputs that you have is probably quite varied, right?
Yeah, we've
So
got like
it's hard to
22 or
just do
23.
yeah, it's hard to just say, okay, here's an input, here's an output, here's an input, here's an output, and have variations for every input that could
Mm,
produce every output and have
yeah.
confidence that, like, when there's a new variation that you've introduced it. Like, that's tough. And so
Mm,
for me, I would probably, if the idea is like tests are for the developer, which they are,
mm,
um, I would prefer to have the ability to pass in 8.5 to that
mm.
calculation and get something out. Because if it breaks, I don't want to have to set up the world in order to be able to test that one thing. I would
Exactly.
like
Yeah.
to be able to say, hey, here's a set of cases for the specific, you know, behavior of how
Mm,
we treat years. I want to be able to get down to just that thing. Now, that you definitely do need to also have a test at a little bit higher level that does ensure that the whole thing is working together and that's
yeah.
not just going to blow up in your face.
Yeah.
But you can be confident that the year things are working correctly if you
Hmm.
give that ability to be able to test that behavior at the lower level. Now, how exactly you do that, I know that there's some people do not want to make those sorts of methods public. They're like, well, it's
Hmm.
only used by the class. I don't want to make it public, but it's, I need to test it. So how do I do this?
Yeah.
So, you can do some weird stuff with reflection to get at protected methods and things like that. But I don't know, like,
Yeah. All
I
of
don't
these
know.
calculation methods are public currently. It's just
Okay,
that
so
they
then you're fine.
don't accept any parameters, right? There's no arguments
There's
going
just
into
this. They
them.
reference this.
They're
Yeah.
referencing
You know,
this.
I actually definitely prefer I do not like using this if I can help it. I like passing stuff to the particular method.
Mhm.
I don't know why that is. I'd have to think about why exactly that is.
I think in this context as well, this is a fractal of um misunderstanding object-oriented programming when this was built. And
Mm.
rather than this being an object, it's just a way to group a bunch of functions together that just happen to operate on an input, but they're not really related in the way that you would expect. Like a person has a first name and a last name and a name method that returns name. Like that's very easy to test because you instantiate the class with a first name and a last name, and you can call the name method and know that you're going to get the first and the last name stuck together with a space. But in this context, it's not really, the cat and longer term, what I would like to have is all of these things to be running in some kind of like action pipeline or whatever, where we
Hmm.
just pass the values through and we just get
Hmm.
back values. So we can like all of these methods on this calculation class would eventually go into like a calculations namespace, and there would be like a bunch of invocable classes in
Yeah.
there. Because when it's an invocable class, we're always going to be passing a value in and getting a
Yeah.
value out.
Yeah. And then you just have a very small test surface for that particular thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you
Because
can
then
kind
we
of
can
mix and
test
match them and
all of
swap
the
them in and
test
out. Yeah.
cases, yeah, for the actions without, or whatever the construct or the pattern ends up being that we use. I think, I need to think about this at a higher level where these things are in a class, but they don't actually belong in a class. And maybe they're all just static methods. So it's calculations, colon, calculate max age, and it, or maximum loan term, and it takes the value in as an argument and then spits out a value. And like
Yeah.
maybe that's the first step.
Yeah, and it just depends too on like how complicated these particular methods are getting. If they're
Mm.
quite complex, then yeah, I could see splitting them out into
It's
something
like a
else.
9 line method. This is the thing. So,
Eh, yeah,
and the
it's
thing
kind of like
is, the other interesting thing that I like, we're testing 8.5 and 9.5 and 11.5 and all of this kind of stuff, but the way that we're calculating the age of the vehicle at the moment is like date y, the date function y minus vehicle age. So
yeah,
it's never going to be a fractional value. It's always going
yeah,
to be an integer.
yeah.
So
Here's so
maybe it's a matter of just like adjusting the test and removing from the data set these fractional values that will never actually be reached in practice.
hmm Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, like I would definitely try and reflect the real world as much as possible and stop, testing goofy stuff if you can. Like if you can guarantee that it's not going to happen, then just don't worry about it. The only thing I was going to say is I think as I was thinking about it, like why I like calling methods with arguments rather than referring to this is it feels so invisible what it's doing. Like if,
Yeah.
maybe 9 lines isn't that long, but you can quickly get out of control. Like, okay, well, what pieces is it touching? Like, what values of this is it actually needing to do its
Hmm.
calculation?
Hmm.
And I kind of like being able to see in the method call, like, oh, dang, I'm talking like 6 different things here. Like, I have to pass in like 6 different items.
Yeah.
Um, and so if I do have to pass in 6 different items, maybe it's like, okay, maybe I break those out into 2 different things, or
Hmm.
it's just, and then I guess too is I can make sure that the types are what I'm expecting if I have them passed in
Yeah.
into the method. And so I get a little bit of type safety there too, and a little bit more predictability as to what the inputs are going to be. So um yeah, I don't know, it's definitely a complicated problem, but I feel like you guys are headed in the right direction. I love the interface thing. It seems really smart. All the things that you're doing as far as like passing them down into subclasses that have specific responsibilities also feels really good to me. I'm sure at one point it wasn't that way, and it probably was all smashed together.
Yeah.
And so now that you kind of have them broken out into their individual pieces, that feels pretty good. And
Hmm.
yeah, so I'm confident you guys will come up with a good solution, and I'm looking forward to hearing about it. But if it was me and you're asking, which I think you are, I would like to be able to pass items into that function, that method, which is already public, which is great for the idea of testability. And also just because I feel better about passing things into a method for typing and to know what items it needs from the object in order to
Yeah.
produce its calculations.
Yeah. I think, I haven't really thought about it until I said it out loud to you, but I think the fact that there is this calculations class which accepts the entire input object as an argument is kind of a smell, because it's not really like, it's just like, here are a bunch of semi related methods but they're not really an object in the context of, an object-oriented programming approach.
Yeah, and I always like, is it like an array that it's passing in?
It's a DTO now. Oh, we did some
Okay,
fun
well, it's a
things with
DTO.
that.
So that's, I was gonna say that's the other piece too. That's a little bit scary. Is when you're passing in an array, and it's just like, I'm assuming these keys are here, and you end up having to
Yeah,
check it. Like, in your constructor, it's like, okay, I'm checking. I'm going to double check that all the keys that I'm
yeah,
expecting are here when I'm setting these
yeah.
things, because
So
whatever.
we did a Fun Day Friday thing. So as part of like this iterative approach that we've been following for the last couple of months, is that we took the raw request and we converted it to an input DTO, which has typed properties for all of the values. So we've got, public string vehicle age, we've got public properties for everything. And then we had like this toArray method on it so that we could instantiate an object, set defaults for all of the values. So, it's possible to
Yeah, sure.
to make a quote where you don't pass some information, you
Yeah.
don't have the information. And then we've got like a toArray method to then get it back out as an array
Yeah.
so that we preserve the behavior of the existing system. So it's still getting an
Nice.
array,
Okay,
and
that's a
it
good
just
call.
it
Yeah.
just like assumes everything exists. But what I did on Friday, as a bit of a Fun Day Friday exercise, was to implement the ArrayAccess interface on this
Oh, there you
object,
go. Cool. So you don't have
right?
to do the toArray anymore. It just can behave as
So
an
we
array.
don't have to do the toArray anymore. We also, in doing this, because as part of implementing that interface, you need to implement the offset exists, offset get, offset set, and offset unset. I think there's the 4 methods that you implement on there. And then, so inside of all of these things, we check, does the snake cased, so we pass, everything is assuming snake case, but all of the properties on the object are camel cased. So
Mm-hmm.
what we do is we take the offset that is passed into the offset exists method. We pass it
In
through
snake
Laravel's
case.
string helper. Yeah, in snake
Yeah.
case. So we go string of, dollar snake, arrow, camel, and then we make sure does it exist. And if not, we throw.
Yeah.
Because
Yep.
then we can start catching any situations within the application where it's accessing things that don't exist.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so now we've got the ability to type this input as an input object. So we get type type completion for all of this stuff. We can start attaching behavior to the input object. These things like vehicle age, is asset
Right.
broker, is mortgage broker, and start referencing this in new code whilst knowing that
Make
all
it
of
to
the
continue to
existing
function
code
as
is
usual.
going
Yeah.
to keep going as though this is just
So
an
nice.
array. So we had to do some stuff because we're typing like carbon interfaces and enum, so we had to handle these things specifically in our offset get, because obviously everything is expecting these to just be strings from the array. So we in the offset get we have to, after we check to see if it
Check the
exists,
object. Yeah.
we then have to check the type. Is this an enum? Is this a backed enum? Is this a carbon interface? And then we have to reformat it so it comes back as a
Passed
string.
it. Yeah.
But it means that everything just keeps working, and we never have to worry about properties that weren't set, array keys that don't exist, all this kind of stuff. And if someone tries to access, if there's a typo because they're accessing an array key instead of a property, then, they'll get an error saying, well, this doesn't exist. So either fix your typo or go and add the property to the input object. So
Love it.
yeah, ArrayAccess is a magical thing that you can use to, preserve this kind of array behavior without having to change any of your consuming code. And that way we can like step all this out. We've got the DTO, now we've got this ArrayAccess thing, now we can start adding behaviors, now we can start refactoring to use the properties instead of using the arrays. And we do this one by one instead of, all 40 or 50 lenders in one go. So
Oh, love it, dude. That's a great solution. Solid. Yeah, especially because you have it built out to 40 or 50. That would be wild. So you can say like, okay, we're going to do these 10 this week, we're going to do the next 10 the next week, and et cetera, and on you go. But yeah, you certainly don't want to, those massive cutover migrations. Oh, those are
never fun.
a nightmare. No, those are a nightmare. Not fun. And the crappy part about those is, as well, is if one thing breaks and you did it all in one big rollover, you have to roll it back.
roll the whole thing
Everything.
back. Mm-hmm.
everything. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's like, as if you do a couple at a time, then it's like, okay, none of those broke. Okay, one broke. What was it? Oh, it was one of these 10. Roll it back. Okay, we can fix that one little piece, but it's not as big of a problem.
It also allows you to test the waters in terms of like, this is the approach that I am taking. Is it correct? Is it
Mm-hmm.
going to work? Is it going to scale from, one class to 50 of them?
Yeah.
You know, and that is really helpful as well. Because as you say, if it breaks, we just roll back that one thing instead of having to roll back, 3 weeks worth of refactoring in one go.
Yeah. Yeah.
But importantly, we wrote all the tests first, so make sure you do that. Even as you say, the high level tests. The first thing that because this is all like a spreadsheet that we've converted to code. So we have a spreadsheet that is the source of truth that says like, given these 20 input scenarios, these are the outputs that we expect. So every time the spreadsheet changes, we've got to update the tests first to
Mm-hmm.
match what's in that spreadsheet to make sure that we don't necessarily know, we don't test all of the values, but we make sure that the right lenders are returned in a given scenario. And so that's enough of a high level smoke test for us to say, okay, we didn't break anything at a high level, that the lenders we expect to be returned have been returned. Maybe someone returns like a negative somewhere, but we can fix a single negative value with some input, um, rather than, just having the whole thing blow up. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I love it, dude. That's a great refactoring story. You could definitely make some videos about that.
mm,
I have got to go tell my oldest to get to bed because it is 10:06 and I'm pretty sure he's still playing Fortnite with some friends. So it is bedtime, young man. Go to
that's right.
bed. Hey, what episode number? 175? Is that right?
175.
Thanks everybody for hanging out with us. North meets south.audio/175 for show notes. If you'd like to hit us up on Blue Sky or on Twitter, check us out at Jacob Bennett, Michael Duenda, or North South Audio. I think I said the domain name before wrong. North meets south.audio. And then, rate us up in your podcatcher of choice. 5 stars would be amazing. Until next time, friends, we will see ya later. Peace.